welcome to Creative Block. I'm your host, V. Gene is away doing some Q-Bomb stuff. He's a busy bee, but we're keeping the show going. We interview people in creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam. We ask people on Twitter if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts. And today with us, we have Marly. I've never said your full name. That's crazy. You have to say your last name.
Yeah, you don't have to say people's last names at them very often in day-to-day life. Hi, I'm Marly Halpern-Graser. V, I've also not only never said your name out loud, I have maybe never heard anyone say your last name out loud.
I know. I have this thing where it's like, I'm like, oh, it's too complicated and I'd rather people not say it. But I guess.
Is it like you heard an American say it once and you're like, no, never again. We're just not going to do that.
It's just like, okay, so when I started learning English in school, everyone has like the English version of their name. So if their French name is like Jean, then it would be John. Mm-hmm. Or if their name is like Mark, then it's still Mark, you know? But yeah. If it's Pierre, then it becomes Peter. But for my name, there's no English name. So I'm like, all right.
Not Violet? What about Violet?
Actually it comes from Violet. So now what I do is I gave in. I'm like, yeah, just say violin, like a violin. But that's why I'm happy that I can go by V.
Yes.
I like V.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about our for a language that has so much French in it, we don't know how to say any of those words right.
Well, I mean, you know, I could say that about French people using English words, so you know. But so I'm really excited to have you on the show because you're writing, you're executive producing, you're creating and pitching. It's really it's going to be really, really fun to go into all of these topics. You've been on shows, you've created and co-created and co-executive produced Right Now Kapow. And on ThunderCats Roar and Aquaman, were you also a producer?
Yeah, so I'll list all my stuff. I've been at Warner Brothers Animation my entire career, and I was fortunate to get that job young, so I've been at Warner Brothers Animation my entire adult life, essentially. And I was a staff writer on Mad on Cartoon Network, and I wrote a bunch of Scooby-Doo. I worked on Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, Be Cool Scooby-Doo. I wrote a DVD. And then I co-created and executive produced an animated sketch comedy show called Right Now Kapow that aired on Disney XD. And then I wrote Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a direct-to-video movie that we did. I wrote a direct-to-video Teen Titans Go movie where they fought the original Teen Titans. I did some writing on the theatrical Teen Titans. And then, I was a producer on ThunderCats. I was really the head writer because Victor Courtwright created it and was the co-EP, I think was his title in the end. And then I was also producer on Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs. And then on ThunderCats, me and Victor developed and pitched that together, and we were both co-EP on Aquaman. On Aquaman, King of Atlantis, an HBO Max miniseries, 3-part, 45-minute each series. Me and Victor Courtwright co-developed it, and we're both co-EPs on it.
That's so crazy. That's so cool. Like, I love ThunderCats and Aquaman. They look so good. Oh, yeah. And the writing is so fun.
We worked on ThunderCats Roar together. I don't know how much you've talked about ThunderCats on here before, but
I've talked about it a little bit because I was like, honestly, that was my favorite show to work on. It was just so fun. It was just like not only just the style of drawing, but the writing. I remember seeing when I took the test and I saw the first page, and I was like, this is the kind of show I want to work on because it's just really goofy and fun. And and it has a little bit of sweetness to it as well. Kind of felt like Dragon Ball, like definitely. Like the first like the beginning of Dragon Ball, and I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I feel like probably because everyone who worked on ThunderCats Roar were like, everyone was like different ages and had different backgrounds and different things that they loved. I think probably the most common point of reference was, I think, everybody on that show loved Dragon Ball.
Yeah, I could see that. That would be and also just kind of like cheesy 80s cartoons.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's nice to hear you say that about the script pages for the test, because writing that script was basically my test. When Victor was, because Victor developed the show on his own. He came up, with all the characters and the tone and everything completely on his own, and he wrote and boarded a different animatic for a different episode, and Cartoon Network liked it, but like wanted to see like what another episode would be like, and so partly basically to test me, I wrote that episode with Victor, and then they did another animatic, and then they used that script page for the test for all the storyboard artists.
That's so funny. That's so interesting. I can't wait to talk more about like what it's like the early days of a show and like developing it and pitching it. But before we get too deep into that, I want to just kind of go talk about a little bit about your origin story. Kind of like, when did you know you wanted to go into writing? Did you always know you wanted to write for animation?
I will answer both those questions. So the thing, I definitely did not know that I wanted to go into writing at a young age. At a young age, I actually specifically disliked writing. Like the actual, like I always liked coming up with stuff. I always liked thinking of stories and telling stories. I just didn't like actually writing, partly because we didn't have a computer as a kid, so writing meant handwriting, which I still don't like. I like typing a little more than physically writing, although honestly, I don't like typing that much either. It's a necessary evil because there's no other way to get my ideas out into the world. What I like doing is thinking of ideas and coming up with stuff and imagining things is basically what I have always loved doing.
Yeah.
And so the common thread for me as a kid was actually more performance. I just liked attention, and I liked anything that let me stand up in front of people and perform and usually make them laugh. I always liked doing stuff that was funny. And so I was homeschooled my whole life until college, so I didn't have any opportunity to be in like school plays or anything as a little kid. Mm-hmm. So what that meant is I just came up with any opportunity I could. I would do, talent shows at like big family parties. I would just gather all the other kids and basically write sketch comedy shows during the party and then make the adults watch us perform it like at that party. We would do basically sketch crams at family parties.
That's so funny.
And but then when I started doing my grandfather, it was a two-prong thing. My grandfather showed me the movie King Kong, the 1930s King Kong, which is, I know a lot of filmmakers have said that King Kong is like the thing that made them want to make movies. And that's the case for me. Watching King Kong as like a 5-year-old made me want to make movies. And I think the reason is because King Kong has this 1-2 punch of the characters in the movie are making a movie. So they're talking about making movies in the movie. And then the effects for King Kong himself, because he was a stop motion puppet, are just like, it's this perfect mix, I think, as a kid, where like you can tell that it's a special effect. It's not an ape, but it's magic that it's moving. And it makes you think about like, how did they do it? And I think that I don't think it's a coincidence that like, Guillermo del Toro and like a lot of people are, and like Peter Jackson, like a lot of people are like, I saw King Kong and was like, I want to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So that happened to me too. So the very first movie I ever made was when I was 5 years old. I made a remake of King Kong where I made all my family act out King Kong in our front yard. And I played King Kong. I was 5, and I was like, obviously, I'm the giant ape, the smallest person here.
Oh my gosh.
And so from that point on, it was like my grandpa would basically give me his hand-me-down cameras. Every time he'd get a new camcorder, he'd give me his old one. So I slowly, over the years, upgraded my camera capabilities. And basically from that point on, a background interest of mine was making movies, and I wasn't good at it. Like, if you saw my movies as an 8-year-old, you would not be like, well, this kid obviously has natural talent. The only thing I had going for me is I just kept doing it. And I did it because then I would make everyone at parties sit down and watch my movies. And so the sort of, I didn't take it very seriously as a career. I was always like, I thought I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to be like a zoologist, or like specifically I wanted to be a herpetologist. I wanted to study frogs.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
I loved frogs and turtles and snakes and lizards. I loved going out into the. I grew up in the country in upstate New York for most of my life, and I really loved like going into ponds and just catching frogs and just wading into swamps and grabbing animals out of the swamp. And I was really concerned with the amphibian decline, which is the frogs
Really?
mysteriously just dying off, and I really wanted to like help fix it. So for a long time, that's what I thought I was going to do with my life. The problem is, the other thing is I was bad at math. I didn't like math. Wasn't good at math. And that was it took me a long time to accept that meant I was never going to be a scientist.
When did you give up on your science stream? How old were you?
I don't think I officially gave up until I was looking at colleges, because up until the point that I was actually looking at colleges, I think even when I was like 14 or 15, I think I probably was still saying, well, I need a college that has a good film program and a good biology program because I want to do both.
That's so funny.
I was probably still saying that until I was like 15 years old.
Oh, wow.
And what changed when I was 14 and 15 is I started making my own claymation videos.
Cool.
And I think I literally think it was, I think a mom, another homeschool mom did like a 1-day animation class for the homeschool kids, where she just had us do like the simple flip book. Like, she like explained what in-betweens were and the basics of cell animation, and then like had us make a flip book. I think I did a bouncing ball that transformed into a bird and flew away, I think.
That's so cute.
And then I literally think I was at home after that class and just talking about animation, and like mentioned something to my dad about like, oh, well, I can't really, because I can't draw 2D. You're going to see in a second when I try to draw something. And I was talking about how I can't draw, and so that means I couldn't really do animation, even though I really love it. And I really think I was just offhandedly like, I was like, well, I could probably do claymation because I can make a little clay guy. And then I just that day just did. I was like, yeah, I could do that. And I just went in my room and like made a little animation where a little clay guy ate another little clay guy. And that started me down the path of doing these little really simple claymation videos. And suddenly people really responded to them and were excited to watch them and started reacting to my movies like they were actually good. I honestly think here's the thing. I think it's just that they were short. Because I was making like 40-minute long movies when they were live action, and they were awful and boring and no one could watch them. But suddenly, once I was making animation, I could only make them like 3 minutes long.
That's so funny. Do you feel like during animation, you had to get to like the core of the idea much faster?
Yeah. I think, well, because it had to be really simple, because I couldn't animate it if it wasn't simple. It had to be short, because even though I was animating very crudely, it still took a long time. So suddenly my claymation movies started getting into film festivals. I started like teen film festivals, but I started getting into teen, and then that started making me take my filmmaking more seriously, and then I started making shorter, more focused live action stuff that was also getting into film festivals. I was doing a lot of these sort of like comedic documentaries, basically, where I would just kind of run around with a camera and like tell jokes. And those were getting into film festivals, and it just made me start taking my filmmaking more seriously. It made my parents like like get me actual editing software. I got like an actual digital camera. I started going to this like summer school program for the arts that New York State has, where I took video, and it just then basically from 14 to 18, that became my thing. Especially because I was homeschooled, that became almost all I did was just make movies. And I wanted to be a live action movie person. I specifically wanted to be like the Coen brothers or M. Night Shyamalan. Like I wanted that card that says written, produced, and directed by Marly Halpern-Glaser on like a feature film that I independently produced. You know, it was you know, I was doing this in like 2001, 2002. So that was like the end of that big 90s independent film boom. When it was like Miramax and Fox Searchlight and, you know, Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith and like that's what I thought filmmaking was being like a film dude who wrote and produced his own movie and, you know, cast the same people in every one of them and everything. And I didn't specifically think of myself as like a comedian or a comedy writer, but like realistically, almost everything I did was funny.
That's so funny that like, how did you not like, do you think it's because you were taking yourself seriously or just because you were like, well, the comedy is just a little bit, but the drama is like a bigger bit? Like, how did you
I'm not really sure. It's like so much of my career was not realizing my actual strengths and just doing everything because I was doing everything. Like I was, you know, shooting and editing and directing and acting, and, you know, doing the special effects. I had this like crappy CG program. Like, God, I wish I had Maya because then I would have known how to use Maya since I was like 14 years old. But instead I had this weird program called like Real D or something. And True Light. I don't know. Anyway, point is I was like, you know, animating. I was doing like Dragon Ball stuff. I would do movies where we'd be like shooting CG spheres at each other and people would explode into particle effect blood. And I combined it. I did, you know, I lived up to my my King Kong inspiration. I did a lot of filming claymation monsters in front of a green screen and superimposing them over my live action stuff.
That is so cool.
So I was doing a lot of that. And yeah, I don't know why I didn't notice that basically everything I was doing was a comedy. I mean, I guess, like I said, I think what I really wanted to be was the Coen brothers. I wanted to make like comedically tinged, artistic, serious movies, I guess.
I know what you mean, though. I think, you know, I know exactly. I agree with that sentiment in the sense that I'm like, also the Coen brothers are like, I think one of the biggest inspirations for me. It's like, because you can make like silly characters do dumb things, but still have really high stakes. And I think this is such a like, it's just such a specific, but like, I don't know, so enjoyable.
But then what happened is, so I realized I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I was only applying to film schools. So then I wound up getting into Emerson College in Boston. And I didn't know this, but Emerson College, especially at the time, was going through this sort of comedy boom. Where there just happened right before I got there, the class right before me just happened to have 6 or 7 just truly like once in a generation gifted comedians. And it was people like Harris Whittles, who has sadly passed, but was a successful stand-up and TV writer. Joe Mandy, who is still a successful stand-up TV writer. Noah Garfinkel, same thing, stand-up TV writer. Just like there were just like 4 or 5 people who have all become very successful stand-ups and TV writers, who all. And sort of because of them, the class right after them, the one I was part of, was full of like 30 people who thought we could do it too. Pretty much none of us have been as successful as that first group. But it just means we were all trying. And so I fell into this group of comedians, and like orientation week of Emerson, I did stand up for the first time. Right away I started trying to join comedy troupes. There were like 7 comedy troupes at Emerson. I wound up like joining 2 of them. I started doing Boston is a big stand-up city, so I started just doing stand-up and sketch just out in Boston. And Boston also happened to have a bunch of people who have become very successful stand-ups. Like I was doing stand-up with Josh Gondelman and Mike Kaplan. We were sort of right after like Eugene Merman was in Boston right before I was, and people like that. And so yeah, I started doing almost exclusively live comedy, stand-up and sketch, but I still thought what I was going to be was M. Night Shyamalan. And it took me 3 years of college to notice that what I was actually good at was comedy, and that the best expression of that was actually TV writing. And so my senior year of college, I didn't have to change majors or anything. Like I have a film major, but I just completely shifted my focus, and I completely shifted to, I'm going to try to be a sitcom writer. And that became my entire goal when I graduated, was to, write a bunch of comedy. In college, I wrote a bunch of comedy spec scripts. I wrote a Futurama script. I wrote a The Office script. I wrote an original pilot. And again, once again, without really noticing it and not thinking about it too much, one of my 2 spec scripts was an animated show. And my original pilot was for an animated show. It was like a Venture Brothers kind of inspired thing. Venture Brothers started airing while I was in college, and was really kind of I liked Adult Swim just in general, but I think kind of like what you said, Venture Brothers had a lot more plot and stakes, and like took its characters a lot more seriously. So like I loved the comedy of like Space Ghost and Sea Lab, but there was something kind of revelatory about taking sort of that sensibility and telling a real story with it, which is what Venture Brothers was doing. And so, again, without realizing it, thinking I was going to try to be a live action sitcom writer, I came out to Hollywood with almost entirely animated sample scripts.
That's so interesting. That's so funny. But it's funny too, because you said The Office, and I noticed that in the Nickelodeon fellowship, the writing, it's often a show that they have for people to spec, in their list. So yeah, because I guess it's like it's so goofy, it's almost animated, kind of like Parks and Recs.
Yeah, and I always say, I can jumping ahead a little bit, like as a producer, if I'm reading sample scripts from people, even if it's a kid's animated show, I don't need your sample script really to be for an animated project, and I definitely don't need it to be for kids. Like, writing is writing and comedy is comedy. Like, if you just give me your best, funniest script, I can tell if you could write an animated kids show or not. And also the things that are sort of really specific to animation and really specific to kids, like I can teach you, but I can't really teach you. I don't have time to teach you like structure and basic writing, and I can't teach you how to be funny. That will never happen. So if you can show me that like you understand structure and basic storytelling and you are funny, I can teach you the stuff you need to know for animation in particular.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's kind of like, like the animation specific side of it, which is, what would you say right now is kind of what you would teach someone for like writing for animation?
I mean, it depends on the show. One thing, I think the biggest thing about animation is that there's a bigger difference from show to show than there is in live action. Like if you're a sitcom, there's basically 2 kinds of sitcoms. There's multicam and single cam. And within those, there's not that much difference. Like if you know how to write a multicam sitcom, you can probably write on any multicam sitcom. If you know how to write a single cam sitcom, you could probably write on any single cam sitcom. But like, think how different, like, I don't know, Avatar: The Last Airbender is from ThunderCats Roar.
Yeah.
Even though ThunderCats is an 11-minute, so I guess that is a format difference. But technically, they were both comedic shows for 6 to 11. But like, no, they aren't. They're for completely different demographics, and they're completely different shows.
Yeah, really. I feel like, animation is like kind of this thing where people are like, oh, well, it's that whole discourse, right? It's not a genre. It's,
Yeah, it's a form, not a genre.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I agree with that. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you have to look at animation the way you'd look at all live action. Like, there's a really big difference between iCarly and Game of Thrones, but they are both live action TV shows.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same comparison between, like Avatar and I don't know, Johnny Test. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly. But so that,
it's-
yes, it's people just think about animation in a sort of reductionist way. But I would say the simplest things that people need to think about with animation. I mean, it's really simple, but it's just like you just have to think a little more visually. You have to imagine what's going to be happening on screen a little bit more, I think, than you do in most live action. Like if you're writing a live action sitcom, you don't spend very much time figuring out the blocking the actors are going to do, because they'll figure
yeah.
it out. The director will figure it out. Like, you don't spend that much time being like, what little pencil is the actor going to be playing with while he says this line? That's the actor's job.
Yeah, that's very true. Do you feel
Um,
like you think about that a lot more when you're writing for animation?
Yeah, definitely. Because in
Mm-hmm.
animation, because, well, I mean, think about it. I mean, like you do writing, and you also do storyboarding. So like, if I handed you if I handed you 3 pages of script that was
Mm-hmm.
literally just 3 pages of dialogue, and my only direction is the characters are like eating breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Think how much work you'd have to do to figure out what they're actually doing for those 3 minutes.
Which is depending on the show. It's kind of interesting you mentioned that, because depending on the show, sometimes something like that could happen. I feel like it's something that's kind of more common in adult animation,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like you get more like a lot of dialogue, and then
And
you'll pitch it to that was kind of how we were working on an adult show I was working on. Like, we would have to pitch to the writers kind of like, oh, this is kind of how I'm thinking about the blocking. And then
Mhm.
they could kind of give directions based on the pitch. And then
Yeah,
we could just go and do the boards.
that
Yeah.
makes sense. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like, I think, and especially in a more adult show, I think it's totally fine to have 3 minutes of dialogue. I mean, think about something
Yeah.
think about something like BoJack Horseman. They do like visual gags in
Mhm.
between the sketches, but most of the show is just dialogue.
Yeah.
But I still think in animation you need to put a little more thought into like, well, what are they going to be doing? What are you looking at?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, because like in live action, it would not be one person's job to solve that. There'd be the people who put those props together and the sets, and someone else would do costumes. The actors would have business. The director would come in and rehearse with the actors. But in animation, you were literally just saying, "Hey, you one board artist, solve all of this."
That is so true. I could go on a big rant, but this is an episode about you, so I will spare the audience.
So I think that's the biggest difference is even
Yeah.
if your characters are just sitting and eating breakfast in animation, I think you have to think a little bit more about what are they doing and what's it going to look like. Even if the artist throws it out and comes up with something better, which they often do, you just don't want to give them nothing. I mean, I would see it with
Yeah.
ThunderCats. Like, we would do our
Yeah.
best to like write out the action sequences and come up with gags, and we would give it to you guys, and half the time the artist would come up with something infinitely better than we ever could. But the other half of the time, they would just draw exactly what we wrote. So you have to thank goodness we wrote something. You have to have something
Yeah.
there, because you don't know how much energy the board artist has that day.
I think that's super true what you're saying. That was something that was also like really true on like a show like The Loud House. For me, was like, okay, I know that the scripts are solid, that if I'm ever like feeling sick or not great, I could just do what's in the script, and then everything will be fine.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
really is my rule for animated
Yeah.
scripts. It has to be detailed enough that if the artist does just literally draw what you wrote, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll always be better if they have time and energy to come up with something better, but like there has to be a baseline, or else it all falls apart.
Yeah. I
Um
think, that's why I'm like, I think I'm leaning kind of more script driven shows for that reason, because it's like it's already so much doing boards. Like, it's nice to have someone who's figured out stuff for you before you come in.
yeah, I mean, one nice thing about ThunderCats and Aquaman and working with
Mhm.
Victor Courtwright in general was I think with that show, I think that's the best. I've one of my like dreams was always to find a happy medium, because you know, a lot of my favorite shows are board driven shows, and I think that you get a lot of really amazing creativity when the artists have that freedom that you just are never going to get if it's script driven. And I was always with Right Now Kapow, we were always trying to figure, because that was a script driven show, and we were always trying to figure out a way to get more of the artists' creativity in there, and we were having so much trouble just getting the show done on time at all that we never had time to like figure out like a more interesting pipeline. And I think with ThunderCats, what made it really work was that, because, you know, Victor is an artist and a writer, and his natural working style is essentially board driven, because what he does when he works on his own is like writes out a little outline and then just boards. So, that's how he would work, like in a perfect world for himself. So like he definitely wanted, and I won't talk about Victor's motivations too much, because you should just interview him.
I'd love to get him on the show as well.
But I'll just say that like ThunderCats probably would have been board driven in a perfect world for Victor, but we didn't have the schedule for it. We didn't have the time. We couldn't give the board artists enough time for them to do it right. And so I think the fun, happy medium for ThunderCats was that, you know, we wrote the scripts. We had our brilliant staff writer, Joan Ford, who did basically we had 50 episodes, and I think she did 47 of the outlines. Of the 52 episodes that we did. And then we had freelance writers, which was sometimes me and Joan writing the scripts from Joan's outlines. But I think what was good about ThunderCats was we would do the scripts, we'd get them as strong as we could. I do personally feel like the ThunderCats scripts, if you were going to literally draw them, they weren't quite funny enough. I think the scripts were solid, and I think they worked, but I think they would have needed another week or two with a team of comedy writers to punch them up and make sure they were actually funny enough.
I think it's just like a thing of like, I agree in the sense that, not that I really love the scripts. Those were some of my favorite scripts to work with, but I agree that it's just like you guys were understaffed.
Yes.
You were like, that's what I mean.
No,
exactly. It's like, it's too much. It's too,
So what we were doing instead was Victor, the big thing we did on ThunderCats is we didn't record the actors ahead of time. On most script-driven animation, the way the pipeline works is you write the scripts, then you record the actors, then you give that audio to the storyboard artists, and they pretty much board to that sort of radio play. And obviously stuff changes, board artists will come up with new jokes, the writers will come up with new jokes, stuff doesn't work, you wind up scratching in some of the audio, and then you get ADR from the actors later, or you do pickups. Hopefully you do pickups, that's better than ADR. The difference being, pickups are when you get the new lines before it's animated, and you plug them into the boards before you animate it, which is better. If you animate the whole thing with scratch, then you have to do ADR, and the actor has to go into the booth and match the lip flap you already have, and that's no fun. You do it, it's fine. But anyway.
Yeah. That happens. That happens more than you would think.
It happens a lot, and it's totally fine. ADR is great, but you want to get as many pickups as you can. But on ThunderCats, Victor would scratch all the audio from the script, and you guys would board to Victor's scratch. And what that meant is you just had so much more freedom to change stuff and rewrite it. And there was so much more expectation that you would all change things and rewrite it. And essentially the storyboard artists were doing that last joke punch up that every script needed. And I think that worked. And I think that was I think that we got the best of both worlds in a lot of ways. But I also know that there were points when even that compromise meant the storyboard artists were overworked. Like, it would have been better if the scripts could have been more polished and you could have done that less.
I think, honestly, looking back, but I think that's just like how the studios are and like how much, budget you have and all that stuff. But I think it was just like, it would have been just like having an additional week or two for boards. I think that would have made it a lot easier. But I do think, I feel like for me as a board artist, I can't talk for everyone, but for me, I had already been boarding for a while. So the schedules were tough, but it was really fun because I came from a lot of shows where we didn't really have a lot of wiggle room in terms of like how much you could add to it. So that was a lot of fun. And also like being able to board in the style of Victor, which is like crazy camera angles, fun, really fun special poses, so like expressions, or just like like being able to break the model all the time. That's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of shows where you can't do that.
Yes. No, it was a very freeing experience for a lot of people. Also, I just gotta say that chunk of time on ThunderCats when the team you were on was you Jeremy Polgar directing, and then you and Keith Peck is storyboarding. Just maybe one of the strongest 3-people board team that has ever been assembled in animation history.
I feel like yeah, that was kind of like
it was insane.
Lightning in a bottle.
Like if anyone listening hasn't watched ThunderCats Roar and you'd like to watch one episode of ThunderCats Roar, check out a little episode called Panthro Plagiarized.
Working on this episode was so much fun because we actually brainstormed a ton with Jeremy in the room. And for me, it was kind of like what I hoped a feature would be like. So it's like you have a really strong script that you have a beginning, middle, and an end. You know where you're going. It all makes sense. It's funny. And then now, but your next step is like, okay, how do we kind of like make the pacing kind of more fun? How do we do? We came up with a bunch of stuff, and it was just like the 3 of us together in the room, kind of like pitching on top of Victor. When Victor does his launches for episodes, he's very thorough. He's great because he gives a lot of directions. Like, for example, oh, what if they broke a mountain? And then you're like, nice.
Yeah.
And all those like notes, passes. Every time we would pitch to you and Victor, there would always be like new jokes that we would come up with in the room. Because
I will say that was an example of you all infinitely plussing what was actually written, because like I'm pretty sure what was actually in the script was like they throw some trees back and forth at each other like ping pong balls. and then you all got in there and you're like, the mountain is ripped apart and magma shoots up, and he balls the magma up and he throws it, and then Panthro picks up water and cools the magma and then slices the cool magma in half.
Yeah, that was just so fun.
It's just really, but you're right. Like what the script had was just a very strong, clear, in comedy we would call it a game.
Yeah.
Which was this just strong, clear game of Vulture Man insisting he had invented this thing Panthro had invented, and every time Vulture Man said it, it made Panthro angrier.
I thought that was such a great episode. Like, would you say that, because you said that in college you did sketch, you took writing classes and all that, but like, you did also improv, right?
Yeah, so I did. I haven't performed that much improv, but I am educated in improv. I did when I'll go back to my origin. So I was doing sketch comedy and I was doing stand up, and that directly led to my first job at Warner Brothers, because I was in college when YouTube was invented. And so we were some of the first people to be posting comedy videos on YouTube. My comedy troupe was called Zebro, and I think it's like we had like 7,000 YouTube subscribers, but
really?
But that made us like the 3rd most subscribed comedy channel on YouTube.
Wow.
But then like right above us, it was like some YouTuber who no one remembers anymore, then Derek Comedy, which was Donald Glover's troupe.
Oh wow.
And then like us. So there was a big gap. The gap between us and Donald Glover was big then, and it has only widened. But we were in there when I first and they were in New York and we were in Boston, and then we all moved to LA. When I first moved to LA, one of the first things that happened is I went to a party at Donald Glover's loft with like the entire cast of Community, which had just premiered. And I was like, yeah, I've made it. I'm in Hollywood, baby. I can explain to Donald Glover who I am. And he goes, oh, okay, I understand why you're here. And then that never happened again. I have not met him a second time. Allison Brie is nice. I've met none of these people a second time.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
But that's the weird thing about moving out to Hollywood is at the very beginning, all the young people who have also just moved to Hollywood and are about to become famous don't know to not invite you yet. So when you first move out here, there's a lot more mingling of the classes, and then eventually they stop and you stop getting invited to these parties.
Oh no!
Is basically what happens. Once you're all in your 30s, they know that they don't need to invite you anymore. But
wow,
that's my Hollywood story. You talked about how people only hear about the successes in Hollywood. So I would say that one of the things that's tough is as you especially if you go to like an entertainment school like I did and like a lot of people in animation did. There's also this thing that happens where like you and your peers all start at the same level because you're all right out of college, and then there's this drift where like some of your peers become very, very successful. For example, my comedy troupe also included Daniel Scheinert, who is one half of Daniels, who made Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, wow.
So some of my early videos and animations in college I made with him, with Daniel Scheinert.
So interesting. Wow, that's so interesting. That's so cool, though.
Like, oh yeah, no, it's great. Like, and I still, we're still friends. I know him. He actually wrote on one episode of Right Now Kapow. Right after he did Swiss Army Man, he was really burnt out doing movies, and we were like, hey, you want to come by our writer's room and write some sketches with us 1 week? And he did. And so if you want to watch one episode of Right Now Kapow, you can check out an episode called Radical Mutants / My Fair Peasant. And that is an episode co-written by one half of Daniels.
I love that. That's so cool.
And it is a very good episode. It was towards the end of our season, and we were a little burnt out, and our writers had pitched 1,000 sketches at that point, and it was nice to have someone come in with some new energy.
Yeah.
So with YouTube, we were making YouTube videos. We got featured on the front page of YouTube a couple times, which was a thing that used to happen. It used to be, there used to be no algorithm. So when you went to YouTube, everyone saw the same YouTube, is how it used to work. And so if you were on the front page, about 1 million people would see your video, which felt like a lot back then. And so the short version is, because of alumnus from our college, we got scouted by this little program Warner Brothers was doing where they hired a bunch of people who had some early internet comedy success, and they flew us out to LA, and for about a year I was making like weird little comedy videos for Warner Brothers, trying to see, they were just trying to figure out, how do you go viral? Can you make money on this? Oh, you can't? Well, you kids are all fired then. Was basically what happened. But because I was slowly gravitating towards animation, the video that I had used to audition for this project was this really, really limited 2D animation that I made, where I had my friend do these really crude drawings of like comic strip characters like Garfield and Mary Worth and Mark Trail. And I chopped them up in Photoshop, and I used Final Cut's motion controls to just keyframe them bouncing around like they were on popsicle sticks, essentially. And then a no lip flap, and that was it. And I made a little like 3-minute animation that's still on YouTube. It's called Protectors of the Earth. Wow. You can find that on YouTube. And that got me my first job at Warner Brothers. And then as part of that weird program, me and my friend Alex Barrett came up with a pitch for an animated TV show. And we pitched it to this program, and they liked it. And so we produced a 5-minute pilot of it, and we produced it with Warner Brothers Animation. And that meant that I met some producers at Warner Brothers Animation. And I met a longtime animation writer and producer, Alan Burnett, who was one of the producers and head writers on Batman the Animated Series, in addition to a million other things. But I think that's the credit he's most proud of. And when my weird internet job was ending, I handed those 3 scripts I told you about. I handed my Futurama script, my Office script, and my original pilot, and I gave them to Alan, and I said, I'm fired. Here's these scripts. Goodbye forever. And then I was unemployed for 3 months, and at the end of those 3 months, I got a call from the office of the then brand new president of Warner Brothers Animation, Sam Register, saying, hey, you want to come in here and help Alan write some Scooby-Doo DVDs and then have that be your job for the next 15 years?
Wow, that's so crazy though. That's great that like your scripts, did you have an agent at the time?
No, I did not.
Oh, wow. So you were just like, oh, here's my scripts. And like, fortunately, they ended up in like Sam's pile of to reads.
Yeah, well, it was really Alan. It was Alan.
Hmm.
So the reason it worked, because you can't just hand people scripts on the street, is the reason it worked is because I had met Alan a couple of times. I had pitched him this TV show idea so he could like give us feedback. He knew that he sort of liked me. He knew that my TV show idea that I did with my friend was like funny and interesting. And so when I gave him those 3 scripts, he was willing to, I think he only read one. I think he just read my original pilot. And he was willing to read it. And then he wanted essentially a writer's assistant to help him with all the Scooby-Doo DVDs and Tom and Jerry DVDs that he was in charge of. And so he told Sam, oh, I've got a guy. Let's hire this guy, Marley. So it was, I mean, the thing people always say is and I'm sure other people have said a version of this on your show before, is that you need luck and you need to be prepared for when the luck happens. Like, yeah, I needed that lucky in of I met this guy right when he was looking for an entry-level writer. I didn't know that. It's not a position that existed before. No one did my job at Warner Brothers before or after. I'm the only one that ever did it.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, so there wasn't someone doing my job before, and when I eventually graduated out of it, I was not replaced. So it was just literally the luck of that position even existing in the moment when I gave Alan the scripts. But I had been working on those scripts for years.
Right, exactly.
And they were workshopped and polished, and I wrote all of them for classes, which meant, whole 15 other writing students all gave me feedback, professors gave me feedback. A couple of them I had sent to festivals and gotten like I never won anything, but I got to like the final round of a couple script writing festivals. And so like if I didn't have those scripts already ready, like when I met Alan would have been too late to start writing a script to give him. I needed to have them already.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
That's really the trick is you need to do the work and the preparation to be ready when that lucky opening happens, because you never know when it's going to happen. But unfortunately, you do also need that lucky opening. Like those 3 scripts would have never done me any good if I hadn't had the perfect person to give them to at the perfect time, which was, that was luck.
Yeah. But here's the thing though, you also kind of had the thought of being like, well, like, oh, I have these scripts, by the way, like if you want to like, because I feel like sometimes I just don't, I don't think about doing that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, well, I met that person. Nice.
And that's absolutely true too. I mean, like, the program that I was in, there were like 12 of us, and I am not the only one that met Alan, and I am not the only one that had a script. And when our job was sort of winding down, also coincidentally, Alan was in the same like office floor as us, even though he was not part of our program. So that another bit of luck was it was very easy for me to give him some scripts because I would see him in the office getting coffee and stuff every day. And so when I gave those 3 scripts to Alan, and then I told, especially my 2 other friends who like were interested in animation and knew him also, that I had done that, both of them were like, oh, shoot, that's a good idea. I should do that. And they did. And he also liked their scripts, but he only needed one guy. And I mean, literally, like, I think my scripts are very good, but like if he had gotten all 3 of our packets at the same time, and if he had been reviewing our stuff equally, I don't know if he would have hired me, maybe. But like, I truly think part of it was he was like, well, Marley was first.
Yeah. No, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, totally.
I mean, because like for the first year that I was there, Alan fully intended to hire my friend Alex, who had done the thing with me, because it was really Alex's idea, the show that we did. And the whole first year I was there, Alan was always like, oh yeah, we got to get Alex over here. We got to get Alex over here. Well, obviously if there's another opening, it goes to Alex, and there never was another opening. And then Alex moved into advertising and just wound up following a completely different, probably more financially lucrative career. It all worked out for Alex Barrett, but he's not an animation writer.
Is that a show that ever so did you, for that show, you ended up doing like a pilot for it, and then did anything happen with it, or is it
less than nothing? So we made a 5-minute animated pilot for it. It was animated, it was produced by Warner Bros. Animation, but we outsourced the actual production, so 6 Point Harness made it. And Alex Barrett is the one who's an artist, so he did the designs and everything for it. And we recorded real non-union actors, but they were real. A couple of them are very successful voice actors now, which is cool. Literally nothing happened with it. Like we never got any. Once it was finished, we never got any feedback. No one ever acknowledged that they saw it. It was just not. It was like just literally it was like finished and just neatly, politely put on a shelf.
Oh no! Yeah, it never like aired anywhere.
Oh,
like,
definitely
went on
never.
Any DVDs.
Definitely never aired anywhere. In hindsight, I'm not sure where it could have aired. The demographic was weird. We were basically trying to do like animated Degrassi. And so it was very much for like teenagers. It was very like joke, like it was characters like, having affairs and doing drugs, and it was like it was like a teen. It was honestly a little bit inspired by Clone High. Like we were trying to like parody teen dramas in animation, but in a way that would not have been appropriate for children. So I literally do not know where that would have aired. You could probably do it now with streaming.
Right. Yeah.
But back then, the only place it could have aired would have been on the N after Degrassi. It would have been like, if they didn't want it, no one was going to want it.
Yeah. So specific. It's so interesting. It's cool though that you guys went for something like very, like, cause sometimes I feel like when pitching, like when I talk to my friends, when we talk about pitching, we are always kind of like concerned about like, well, is Exec gonna like it? Is it gonna be able to air anywhere? Like, more concerned about what other people think, what the audience might think, rather than what we like, and I'm noticing this trend a lot with I guess, well, not just my generation, but also like younger generations. And I wonder what like you think about like what's the right amount of like, because when we had Jonan Vasquez on the show and we were talking about how he was writing Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, he was like, well, I just want to do something that I thought was funny. And I was like, oh, this is so smart. This is something. And I feel like sometimes it's something that we can forget along the path of making entertainment, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that is the eternal balancing those two impulses of something that you're passionate about and something that you love and you're going to be excited about, but that then someone will also buy. I think that pendulum is just the eternal struggle of our industry, especially in TV. I mean, that's the thing that kind of stinks about TV compared to movies. And although honestly in animation it probably doesn't really matter because animation is so expensive, but like it is possible to make a movie that is purely art. Like you can follow the white whale of Thief and the Cobbler and spend your whole life making it if you really want to. It's something you can do. That's probably a bad example because it didn't really work out, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There are absolutely films and animated films that are purely works of art and meant to be appreciated that way. All TV is commercial art. It has to be. There's no independently produced passion project television show. I guess you could do a web series that way, but we wouldn't call it a television show. Like to get on a TV network or to get on a streamer, someone has to think they're going to make a lot of money by doing that.
Right.
And so TV specifically, and obviously big theatrical feature animation has that also because it's just too expensive. You can't make The Incredibles by yourself, no matter how much you might want to. that I think that it's there. You're always balancing. If basically your options are, you have to take into consideration the commercial aspect of, will someone buy this and who is that person? Or you have to get lucky. You have to make exactly what you want to make and hope that coincidentally there is someone who wants to buy that.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's an option. You know, I mean, it's all luck. I mean, honestly, you have to get because the thing is, even if you set out to make a perfectly sellable, perfectly commercial thing, you still have to get lucky. Someone still has to want to buy it, and you don't really know what anyone wants, and they don't know what they want. The other thing is, sometimes you could pitch someone something they would never ask for, but something about it clicks with them, and they're like, "Oh, of course, that's what we want." So it's all a mix. I mean, it just depends on what kind of thing you're doing, who you're pitching it to. But I think you just always have to balance those things. I mean, I do. What I will say is, you should not sit down and try to algorithm your way into the perfect sellable pitch, because you'll never get it right. If you could do that, Netflix would be doing it. And as we've seen, they can't. So that you should not on purpose try to soullessly make something just to sell it, because you'll probably fail. So you should always make something that you're also passionate about and that you also like and are excited about, because it's just the only way to get lucky and make something other people are going to be excited about.
Yeah, that's true.
The only caveat to that is, my career sometimes Warner Brothers comes to me and says, "We're gonna make a Flintstones show starring Pebbles and Bam Bam, whether you make it or not. Would you like to make it?" And then I say yes. And that's a slightly different process. Sometimes that's how it works. Sometimes Warner Brothers came to me and Victor, and they said, "We want to make an animated Aquaman miniseries. We know that James Wan is interested in producing something like that, and we think it would be really smart to jump off the success of his live action Aquaman movie." And Warner Brothers said to Victor, "We think doing Aquaman in your style could be cool. Do you want to play around with it and see what comes out?" And that's how it happened. So it's like, obviously we made something that we were excited about and passionate about. And it, especially, really anything Victor makes comes from a pretty personal place, because he's just a very personal kind of auteur kind of creator. But also, we didn't have to think, will Warner Brothers buy this? They told us they would. Like, they came to us and said, "We want to buy this. Make it, please." And if we had done a really bad job, they would have said, "Oh, never mind, you're fired." But like, they did ask us to do it. Same thing with Right Now Kapow. Like, I'll do both versions. So the way I sold Right Now Kapow to Warner Brothers, because there's two steps, right? So Warner Brothers is the studio, but then but Warner Brothers does not and did not then and does not now control an actual network. So Warner Brothers Animation can't greenlight shows. Someone has to buy it from them. Sometimes it's a sister company. Sometimes it's Cartoon Network, which used to be owned by Turner. And now we're all Warner Media, Warner Discovery. A lot of times, it's HBO Max, which is also Warner Discovery. But it's not Warner Brothers itself. Sam Register is not deciding what shows get made. He's deciding what shows to develop, and then we have to sell them. So the way I sold Right Now Kapow to Warner Brothers, the way I got them to option it, I did have an agent at that point. While I was on Mad, I got an agent and had that agent get me initially raises on Mad, so I didn't have to ask for my own raises. The biggest reason you want agents in animation, agents aren't amazing necessarily at getting you work. Basically, well, whatever. I'll do this too. Okay, so here's the deal. If you're a writer, there's three things you could have. You could have an agent, you could have a manager, or you could have a lawyer. So an agent, here's the theoretical differences are: an agent is sending you out for work. An agent theoretically knows who's looking for writers and has writers that they suggest to people. That doesn't happen so much in animation, but that's the idea. And then an agent gets 10% of whatever you make because they're helping you get the work. An agent also cannot legally advise you on legal matters, but any agent knows how contracts work and can give you perfectly good, non-legally binding legal advice for your contracts. And agents can negotiate your contract for you, and agents can ask for raises, and also an agent would then be invoicing for you, which if you've ever been a freelancer, you know invoicing sucks. And it's cool to have someone else whose whole job is to make sure you get your money.
Yeah.
For the low price of giving them 10% of it.
Yeah.
And then a manager, which I've never had, but as I understand, a manager is more actually helping you. Theoretically, the idea of a manager is they are actually helping you figure out what your career should even be, and like giving you advice and basically managing your career, helping you put your career together, plan it out. They're a little more like a life coach for your career. And the big difference is that a manager is legally allowed to be a producer on one of your projects, so which an agent is not. So a manager can put a show together and then work on that show. An agent can't do that. And you would also give a manager a percentage of your money. And then a lawyer, like you would imagine, just negotiates contracts, and doesn't do anything else. And in kids animation, you should not have all three. That's a waste of your money. You should just have one. Because in kids animation, any of those three people, an agent, a manager, or a lawyer, can negotiate your contracts for you, and that's all you really need. So personally, I like to have that one person be an agent, because it is nice to have some help, like getting work and scouting work. But the point is, don't have all three. If you're in live action, you're making so much money, you can have all three and it's probably worth it. But in animation, we're in a different union. We don't get paid as much. Don't give away 35% of your income.
Yeah, that's a lot. That would be crazy too, because then like, wouldn't that be like a conflict of interest anyway between the manager and the agent?
No, a lot of people have both.
Oh, really?
In live action, it's pretty common to have both.
Oh, interesting.
Because like I said, they do slightly different things. Because but in my personal experience in animation, I don't know why you would ever have both. And if you're only going to have one, I feel like people with only an agent have a better outcome than people with only a manager for writers. If you're an artist, you probably only need a lawyer, realistically. But it's a little different for artists, so I don't want to give definitive advice. But no matter what, you need somebody negotiating your contracts for you, and you need somebody asking for raises for you, because you don't want to do it yourself. It's awkward.
Yeah, it really is. I feel like it also kind of depends as an artist, kind of what you're trying to do. If you're trying to pitch shows and create a show, then yeah, I think an agent is like necessary, because they kind of know like who's an executive, who are the people you have to talk to, like meeting people and all that jazz.
Yeah, if you're not trying to create your own show, it's not as big a deal, because your contracts are always just going to be your salary, and that's pretty straightforward. But anytime you're selling the rights to something that you create, or honestly, even if you're not selling the rights, even if you're coming on board to develop a Jurassic Park show for someone, you want an agent or a manager making sure you're getting the best deal, because there's a lot of money to be made on a Jurassic Park show. You want to make sure you're getting as much of it as you can. Yeah. Especially because you don't own Jurassic Park. You know, you got to make sure you're getting paid while you're working on it. So the way I sold Right Now Kapow to Warner Brothers is I was a staff writer on Mad. Mad hasn't had a lot of longevity. I don't know that people remember, but Mad was actually a hit show. We did 4 seasons. We did 103 episodes. We were nominated for an Emmy. We were in that exact same era with Adventure Time and regular show, and so that meant we were the 3rd highest rated show on Cartoon Network.
Yeah,
but
I
like
remember.
that's a big deal.
Yeah. I remember my sister would watch it a lot with my dad. Mad.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So there was Teen Titans Go exists because it was one of the main directors on Mad co-created Teen Titans Go, and the point of it was to sort of have the pipeline and comedic style of Mad.
That's so interesting.
Aaron Horvath was one of the main directors on Mad, and then he co-developed Teen Titans Go with Michael Jelinek.
I feel like that's so crazy. I thought Teen Titans Go was older than Mad.
No.
So funny.
So they started Horvath. Basically, Horvath was, incredibly talented and could have worked anywhere he wanted. And so after a year or two of Mad, I think he got a job offer somewhere else. I don't remember where or how definite that was, but basically Warner Brothers knew they could lose him, and they didn't want to, and so they're like, please stay, here's a raise and a better title, and do you want to develop this other show? And so yeah, that's the Teen Titans Go, which then became, you know, one of the most successful shows of its generation, was a direct, like, because of Mad. It wouldn't have existed if they hadn't made Mad.
Wow.
And then over on Nickelodeon, Breadwinners was created by two Mad people who met on Mad, and the Breadwinners style was very much the way they're, like, Gary Doodle's Mad sketches were exactly like Breadwinners.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I remember listening to an interview. I forgot where it was, but they talk about that they met on Mad, the artist and the writer.
Yeah, it was Gary Doodles, and then Steve Borst was the writer, who was one of the other. There were like four or five writers who were on Mad significantly more than anyone else, and Steve Borst was one of them, and he's one of the main Teen Titans Go writers also. So that's another way that Teen Titans Go has a lot of Mad. And then the least successful of the shows that only exist because of Mad is my show, Right Now Kapow. Which was not a hit show because it aired on a network that was almost dead when we aired, which was Disney XD.
That's also the thing, though. I remember the first time I saw Right Now Kapow, I went in to meet someone at Disney TV, and I saw it on the TV, and I was like, that's so interesting. This is like so different from Disney's style.
So yeah, I mean, okay, all right, I keep jumping ahead. So the way I sold Right Now Kapow to Warner Brothers is Mad was wrapping up. Me and my friend Justin Becker, who also went to college with me at Emerson, also did Zebro comedy with me, was also in that Warner Brothers program with me. I managed to get him a job writing on Mad. And then, so the two of us together, basically, Warner Brothers was like, oh, Mad's probably wrapping up. We really like you guys. You should pitch us some stuff. And so what I did is I pitched Warner Brothers 5 original adult animated shows, and they said no. And then I pitched them 5 original kids animated shows, but like regular scripted story, not sketch shows. And they said no. And then they said, we'd really like to do another sketch show with you. Can you pitch us a sketch show? So then me and Justin said, okay, what if we do an animated sketch show? And they said, sold. That's not totally true. We did pitch them the idea. We did pitch them the conceit of Right Now Kapow, which was, the conceit of Right Now Kapow was that working on Mad while Adventure Time and Regular Show were the most popular cartoons in existence, was a little disheartening, because obviously, even though people liked our show, they did not like it as much as they liked Adventure Time and Regular Show. And so we were kind of looking at that being like, okay, what could we do differently in our next sketch show to try to like bridge that gap? And what we came up with was, we were like, okay, well, when you watch, you know, Monty Python or Kids in the Hall or Key and Peele, they don't do a lot of reoccurring characters. They do some, but that's not really the appeal. The appeal is that you love the actors. And, you know, if you're watching SNL and Kristen Wiig comes out, you're like, oh, I like her. I don't even know who her character is yet. I already like her. Or, you know, you know, Kenan, you know, I'm the right age where I've been watching Kenan Thompson do sketch comedy for my entire life. So I'm very invested in him as a performer at this point. And so like, we were like, how can we do that in animation? And so the idea we came up with is we cast 6 comedians to be the cast in Right Now Kapow. They are all amazing voice actors. Some of them had worked in voice acting before, but they were also all stand-up and sketch comedians. And they were a lot of them were people we'd worked with in live action, stand-up and sketch. And our idea was, we'll have these 6 actors do all the voices, but our big trick was kind of like the Muppets. Our idea was, so, you know, you've drawn ice cream on the screen for people watching on the YouTube. That was one of our characters. And the way it worked was, that was Kyle Kinane, the stand-up. And anytime Kyle did a voice, anytime if he played a barber, or if he played a little kid, or if he played a teacher, or if he played a cop, he played a genie, anytime he did the voice, that character had an ice cream for a head. And the idea was, that way you know it's Kyle. You know it's the same guy. Even if you don't, you know, you're a kid, you don't know it's Kyle Kinane. You know that's ice cream. That's I know Ice Cream. And, some of, Kyle kind of always sounds like Kyle because that's the kind of performer he is. But some of our actors, like Baron Vaughn, played Moonhead. And Baron Vaughn is like an amazing voice actor. He can sound 100 different ways. Sometimes he'd be doing completely different voices. You would never, ever know it was him, except he always had that Moonhead. So that way you would always know it was him. And you would just understand, oh, Moonhead has a lot of range. Oh, Ice Cream Head really doesn't. But that's okay. He's really funny. And so that was our pitch. And so Warner Brothers was like, great, we love it. So then the cool thing about it, and the only reason the show got made is so at that point, Warner Brothers was really only selling shows to Cartoon Network, but Cartoon Network really only had the budget to buy like 2 Warner Brothers shows at a time. And so there were only ever really 2 Warner Brothers shows at a time, sometimes 3. And there had just been that, I don't know if you guys have talked about this, but there was that like 2010s, 2011, basically action show implosion where like every network canceled like 4 action shows.
Oh,
so that was like, it's when Young Justice got canceled the first time. It was Beware the Batman got canceled. Green Lantern animated series got canceled. That was all on the Warner Brothers side. But then at Cartoon Network, it was like Symbiotic Titan and Generator Rex, and Secret Saturdays, I think. And then at Disney, it was Tron and Motor City. At Nickelodeon, I think it was, Korra almost got canceled, but then they brought it back. Basically, everyone was like, oh, shoot, we're not making action shows anymore. And so Warner Brothers, especially at that point, then just had like 2 comedies. We just had Mad and Teen Titans, and that was it. And so they were trying, it was a very brief window where they're like, we got to sell shows other places. And so a big part of the problem with Warner Brothers is they mostly do intellectual property, library characters, stuff Warner Brothers already owns. And Disney's not going to buy a Scooby-Doo show because that's promoting Warner Brothers mascot, right? Warner Brothers won't let them sell a Superman show to Nickelodeon. They don't want Superman on Nickelodeon. Superman is Warner Brothers guy. So the idea of us doing an original show was that meant we could sell it to whoever wanted it. So we pitched it to, at the time, it was pre-streaming. So Netflix existed, but they weren't doing original kids animation back then. I don't think they were doing original anything back then. So we pitched it to Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and Disney XD. And the way it went was basically we pitched it to Cartoon Network, and they were like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. This is basically the kind of thing we do here at Cartoon Network. So I like it, but we don't really have a place for it because we do this already. And then we pitched it to Disney XD, and they were like, whoa, this is like nothing we've ever seen before. And we're really interested. And then we pitched it to Nickelodeon, and they were like, oh, this is like nothing we've ever seen before. And we are calling security. Leave our offices immediately. And so because we were able to pitch it to 3 places, one of them was interested. And so we wound up developing the show with Disney and airing our 26 episodes on Disney XD. And in some territories internationally, Right Now Kapow was the very last thing to ever air on Disney XD before it was shut down forever.
Wow.
I've seen footage where someone's like, Right Now Kapow credits cut to, goodbye, Disney XD Africa, we don't exist anymore.
Wow, that's so funny.
So we closed out the channel in some territories.
Wow, that's so crazy.
So I'm pretty proud of that, actually. But that was a big boost for me. So a big thing, and a thing that stinks about kids animation especially, but animation in general, is in the Writers Guild, whether you're live action or animated, because some animated shows are in the Writers Guild, and then you have a better contract. Mostly adult animation is in the Writers Guild, but that's not the rule. Some adult is Animation Guild, some adult is Writers Guild. Kids could be Writers Guild, nothing's stopping them. It's all very complicated and a subject for a different 3-hour-long podcast. But one of the downsides to the way it works in the Animation Guild, and we're trying to change this with our new contract, is there's no steps really. You're basically just a staff writer, and then maybe you could be a story editor, which is the title for like a head writer. And then that's it. There's nowhere else to go until you've created your own show.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was a staff writer for 5 years. I was a staff writer for 4 seasons of Mad, and then 1 season while I was developing Right Now Kapow, I was a staff writer for 1 season on Be Cool Scooby-Doo, and then I just jumped right to EP creator. And that's, that boosted my career, and I've permanently stayed up at that producer level, but like that's not really, it's not a great progression. It would have been better if I could have moved up the ranks and worked my way up, but there was no way to do that. You're just a staff writer until you luck out and sell a show. And that's not how it works in live action. In live action, you would like get promoted every year and be like running a show you didn't create for a year before you even worry about trying to sell your own show.
I feel like it's because in animation, it's just like so many of the jobs are condensed. And as a writer, like you're so early in the pipeline that like a lot of the shows, the writers are done when the boards start, or like there's a little bit of overlap, but sometimes the writers are done and before like even the designers come on. Or
and
like,
the sort of crazy thing is that's happening now more and more in live action, because what streaming is doing is the episode orders are getting shorter and shorter. And if you're only making 6 episodes of a Marvel Disney Plus show, you're finished writing it before the show's being made. And a lot of those Marvel shows do just have like 4 staff writers and then the head writer, and that's it. And that's more like an animated show. And it kind of stinks because, we always talk about how we want animation writers and live action writers to have more parity, but I wanted us to be more like them, but instead they're becoming more like us.
That's so
it's
true.
Going in the wrong direction. Anytime a live action writer tells me about like sort of how much worse their job is getting and how much harder their industry is getting, they basically just describe to me the way animation has always been.
Yeah, it's so hard. I feel, and especially now, I don't know if you look at that still, because now it's not really YouTube shorts anymore. I mean, there is YouTube animators, but there's also like on Instagram or TikTok, I'm seeing more and more people get really popular. Like this morning I was scrolling and I saw this like Animal Facts or whatever. And it's almost kind of like a sketch show. You have like a couple of little animals. I think it's all made in Blender. And I'm like, okay, like people are making cartoons by themselves and like quality, like TV quality cartoons. And I'm just like, all right, well, now I guess you gotta be able to do everything by yourself.
But that's always, like, I mean, basically ever since Flash animation started, there's always been people who could do that, because that's like, it used to be Newgrounds. I think Newgrounds still exists.
Yeah, Newgrounds is still around. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, definitely. And that is also like my, in some ways, the way I got my career started can't be replicated because it was so many like weird one-offs. Like, the program I was hired to do at Warner Brothers doesn't exist anymore and really stopped existing when I stopped working there. And like the job I got at Warner Brothers Animation doesn't exist anymore. But the universal thing that I did that I still think is the right advice is the 2 things. So it's the scripts that I wrote, but then also if I had not made those super limited animations myself and put them on YouTube, if I had not made the sketch videos that got featured on YouTube, I never would have gotten that first job and I wouldn't have met Alan. So like, especially if you're a writer, unfortunately, you can't just write. You either need to do the other jobs as best as you can, or you need to team up with people who can do those other jobs, because no one would have read my script if I hadn't made some videos on my own.
I agree. I feel like that's very true. People just like having something to, it's something that I'm starting to realize as well. It's like people just don't want to read. They just want to watch something.
Yeah.
So even if it's I think it was with Worthy Kids that we talked about Metal Puck. I can't never say the word, but it's the Jack Black Tenacious D thing that he did, which is just like posted, like it's just like Sharpie drawings over a full hour, but it's still like people will watch it.
Yeah, you just got to do something. I mean, Dan Harmon was also like a TV writer and stuff, but like really him and Justin Roiland like were able to explode because of Channel 101 and making they made their, there wasn't YouTube, so they made their own platform to post web series.
Yeah, that's,
and like that was,
really...
it's not the only reason they have their careers, but it was part of it. And like, it's just, it's like if you want to be a writer in particular, you need
Mhm.
really good, really solid scripts. But to get someone to be willing to read those scripts, you probably have to do something else. And that can be comedy. That can be sketch comedy. That can be stand-up comedy. It's
Mhm.
a very common way to break into TV comedy writing is just to do comedy yourself. And the good thing about stand-up, the good thing about sketch is you have to be a good performer, obviously, but you don't have to be you don't have to be good enough to perform professionally to let your writing
Mhm.
stand out and show that you're good at writing.
Yeah, and I was gonna say also because you have all this experience in like improv, sketch. You've also done stand up. I think it's kind of like a common thread that I see even now, like working in animation on like direct to streamings. I see a lot of writers from like SNL or like from like a sketch.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the episode that we did with Alex Hirsch, he said that he was doing competitive improv when he was in high school. So
Mm-hmm.
I think all of those skills are just like you know, like you've been like work, like you had those 3 scripts, but you were also like you've been working on that craft through all these other
Yeah. And I've written
yeah.
more sketches than I've written spec. Like at the point when I first started working professionally, I had written a lot more sketches than I had written TV episodes.
Mm,
Because I wrote 3 TV episodes as samples, I'd written, dozens and dozens and dozens of sketches so I could perform them. And I
mm,
also had a sketch packet. If you want to actually get hired to write sketches, you need a sketch packet. You need to write like 5 or 6 sketches and put it together and be like, here's my best sketches. That's another kind of writing sample that you can have. I think I also gave Alan my sketch packet, but I don't think he read it.
oh, I was gonna ask you, think he read only the sketches because they're shorter?
I'm pretty sure he only. So the other thing is, I do think in this day and age, especially, but and also, well, definitely when I was getting in because it's what I did. But I think now too, you should start with an original pilot. I think that's the most important thing to have.
Yeah,
Every time
yeah,
I've given someone options, what they want to read is my original pilot. So I think
yeah.
it's good, especially if you're in school. Definitely write some spec scripts of other shows. It's invaluable practice, and you at some point you need to sit down and write an Always Sunny script or a Rick and Morty script or some show you like. You need to just try to write it, and you'll learn how to write by copying a show that you like. And also, being a staff writer, your job is to copy shows, so you need to
Yes.
learn how to do that. But for a sample, you want one of your samples to be an original spec pilot, because that's usually these days that's usually what people want to read. And I think the main reason is that because of streaming and cable, and this has just gotten more and more, the chances we're all watching different shows now, and no show has the audience that the biggest shows used to have. So like in the 90s, if you wrote a Friends script, every single person you would ever meet in TV will be familiar with Friends, and they'll know the
Mhm.
characters, and even if they don't like the show, they've seen it, and they'll be able to tell if you did a good job writing a Friends script. But like, say, if I wanted to write a script based on one of my favorite comedies now, I'd probably do like What We Do in the Shadows. There is no
Mhm.
guarantee the individual person I'm talking to has actually seen What We Do in the Shadows, because
Yeah.
a hit show now has a tenth of the audience that a hit show had 20 years ago.
Would you say that specking a script of like an older type of show, like Friends, The Office, or that where it hits that everybody saw is still like a good idea or like eh?
Generally, I would say no, because
Mm.
if you're going to write, here's the other reason to write an original pilot. If you write an original pilot, nobody knows when you wrote it. You can just say you wrote it just now, even if you wrote it 4 years ago. They don't know. It's an original pilot, and as long as it's still, don't use a 5-year-old script if you're a better writer now. But as long as you still feel like it is your best script. Also, every time you're about to send a script, here's the trick. You need your script ready to go, but the day before you send it to someone, read it one more time and see if you want to change anything. It's too late to write the script. It's not too late to do one last draft. I always do that. But generally, if you're going to write a script for an existing show, the rule is it should be a show that's on the air right now, and it should be an episode that could be in the current season.
I
And the
see.
reason to do that basically is to prove you wrote it recently. Because people want to
Oh.
know that you're writing kind of consistently, and they want to know that you can do it fast, relatively fast. Like if you write a show, if you write an episode that takes place during a current season, at least they know you wrote it, within 4 or 5 months, 6 months.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I would say the only exception to that, and I'm hesitant to give this advice because I think most people shouldn't try this, is some people have had success basically doing a gimmick script based on an old show. So like if you write, for example, like a friend of mine did this as a play, they performed it at, they performed it at UCB, but this could have been a script. Someone did Seinfeld, but during the Purge. And that kind of thing could work. Like if you're like, oh, it's whatever. Yeah, if so,
because it's almost a spoof at this point.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's not an original, but because I'm thinking also about a show like, for example, Angie Tribeca, which I think is so funny. I love the show. But it's kind of like a spoof show, so it's kind of like almost as if they wrote Naked Gun.
Yeah, definitely. So I think if you're gonna do an old famous show, you can't just be a normal episode of that old famous show. You would need some kind of like gag. But I think most people aren't gonna pull that off. I don't really think that's what, like, if you have an amazing idea like that, great, but like you probably won't. So in general, like, well, you know what? I'll just tell you one that I had, which if I had finished it, maybe would have been a good sample script. I wound up hitting in some story problems. And then just decided to not finish it. But I had an idea. And I am positive the answer is no. But do you know the very old American sitcom F Troop?
F Troop? No, I don't think. Well, let me just look it up if I know it by a different name in French.
Oh, maybe. I don't think you do. I'd be very surprised if it traveled well. But the idea of the premise of F Troop, it was a show from, it must have been the 60s. Definitely.
Yeah.
So I know it because it used to air on Nick at Night in the 90s. It aired on Nick at Night as an old sitcom. So the premise of F Troop was that it was like soldiers in America right after the Civil War, like while they ran a fort in Native American country right after the Civil War. Great comedic stuff. And the idea was that they were just like incompetent. It was like a fort of incompetent soldiers, like bungling around and blowing up their own tower. And the main character was basically a criminal. He was like running a black market where like, and the like incompetent general who could never like catch him doing it. And I just really like, it's just an old cheesy, very classic, old American sitcom that I like. And so I had the idea for a parody of it where, what if it was exactly F Troop, but set in then modern Afghanistan?
Oh no.
And I was like, and the idea was to show how insensitive and wrong it was to make F Troop because of how actually serious that situation was.
Yeah, I know. I see what you're saying.
And so my idea was I'll treat it exactly as Goofy, but it's in Afghanistan. And for a lot of reasons, I didn't finish it and never showed it to anyone. But that was my attempt to do that. Like, I'm going to do an old show, but like with a gimmick.
Right.
And so that's my cautionary tale of probably not worth it.
Well, I guess it's like, when you're like, because you're already like starting with this show that's like, there's.
So generally
problematic.
Generally, my advice would be, pick a show that is currently airing that you really like. And it's a little tough now because every show is serialized and every show has a plot, so it makes it a little harder to where do you fit your episode in. But if you should try to write a current show, and also if the biggest reason to write a spec script of an existing show is pretty much to submit it to festivals and fellowships, and like you said with Nickelodeon, they're always going to have a list of acceptable shows, and it's always going to be pretty much current shows. So true. if you're a writer just starting out, it really does make sense to look at not so much festivals because they can be kind of a ripoff, but any fellowship, anything where if you win, you really get something. Those are worth it, and they're competitive and they're hard to get. But if you can get into one of those writing programs, that's a good leg up. And though they're always going to have a list of acceptable shows, and it's always going to be a recent show. This is going to be your only options.
Yeah.
So it's a good muscle to have, but you really do want an original script too. So you pretty much have to write 2 scripts, and then you're ready for luck.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I took some writing classes with the writing pad at the beginning of the year, and everybody that was a panelist said the same thing. So I do believe that, yeah, that's
Um,
kind of how it is right now.
yeah, and
Like,
this is all
yeah,
obviously comedy advice, but it pretty much works the same for drama. I would say basically the
yeah.
same thing. You'd want a spec; it would be hour long instead of half hour, but you would want an original spec pilot, and then you'd probably want to write like an episode of The Flash or whatever
Yeah.
whatever drama you like.
Which is hard because writing an original, you have to do so much. You have to like set up the world, set up your characters, and on top of that, be funny
I
and
know.
like
I
interesting.
know
It's so
I mean, that's
much.
all I've been doing the last year and a half. I'm on under a development deal at Warner Brothers, and all
Mm.
I've been doing is developing and pitching and like writing pilots and stuff. And yeah, it kind of stinks because it's like the pilot episode of a comedy, especially, is never the best episode of the show ever.
Hmm.
Like it's comedy pilots are like sometimes drama pilots are sometimes the best episode because sometimes it's just a really cool movie that sets up the characters, but the
Hmm.
pilot of a comedy is basically they always do something better later once the characters are established, they find their voice.
I agree. I feel like even though I'm just doing my webcomic on the side, like I feel like I was just like recently I was at an event where we were reading comics and I was looking through my first chapters of Rodney and I was like, ooh, not the best writing.
Oh well,
But
with a comic it's doubly because I bet you draw them a little differently now than you did then, right?
I do, but I feel for me to join. I don't know. It's a really funny thing because I hear sometimes people being like, "Well, the art is so much better now." Like when, for example, even when they're talking about Scott Pilgrim,
Oh
and
yeah.
I'm like, I thought the art was fine. I mean, I'm not, I'm not
But you
very.
could,
I feel like,
but you would say if you look at Scott Pilgrim, you can tell that the art changed, even if you like it,
yeah,
even if you like it just as much in the beginning.
yeah, exactly. That's so funny. Well, I wish we could talk more about pitching and everything, but we're kind of running on an hour and a half, and I do want to get to some questions.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll probably.
Yeah, I would say the only quick thing I want to throw in about pitching is that's the biggest way that my stage experience helped me is I'm very
Mhm.
comfortable performing in front of people, and I don't get stage fright, and I can all the improv. Like I said, I haven't done much improv really performed, but I took four levels of improv classes at UCB. I've done a lot of
Mm.
stand up. Like I can think on my feet, and that even if you're an artist, it was probably a good idea to do some stage performing just to get used to that. Because as you
Yeah,
know, as artists, you're pitching all the time because you also have to pitch even if you're not pitching your own show, you're pitching your boards most likely.
that's true. Yeah, if you're a board
If
artist,
you're a board artist, if you're a designer,
yeah,
you don't have to pitch so much.
yeah.
CG riggers don't pitch their rigs, I guess. You're right.
Yeah.
What if they
Well,
did? What if they were like, and here's the elbow?
I think in feature, because I've been to a couple of art, but it's usually no, I feel like it's usually the lead that will pitch all the like kind of like, oh, and we did this painting to kind of do this mood and like
Oh yeah,
we're trying to get this.
art directors are probably sort of pitching the art concepts and stuff, right?
Yeah. And sometimes you have like the artists themselves kind of trying to give a little context, but it's not as much as I could anyhow, this was going to be a big tangent.
I
I could
know.
see how that in some places that would happen, but definitely it's not as
My
big
other
as.
my other big pitching advice is see if you can find any video of Jorge Gutierrez pitching anything because he's probably the best at it.
He's great.
he's
He's amazing.
he's so good at pitching.
Yeah, he's a storyteller. He's really, yeah.
He was on Mad. He would just for a little bit, and he would. For him, Mad was a little fun break. His career was well on its way anyway, but we did have him for about a year.
Oh, was he a writer or an artist?
I mean, he was an artist, but on Mad there was some opportunity for artists to sort of pitch ideas and stuff. And me and Jorge collaborated on some little sketches and videos while we were on Mad. And actually, I know one of the questions that got asked on my Twitter. So maybe you don't have it on your list. Is a question where the answer involves Jorge. So I'll hold on to it.
Oh yeah, well, let me ask the question right now. So, I have your Twitter pulled up.
Okay, great.
So, what if any was left on the cutting room floor with the DC Nation? No, is that it?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, DC Nation shorts you worked on: Superman of Tokyo, Animal Man, Vive, Farm League, Tales of Metropolis. Anything you pitched that wasn't greenlit? And that is a question from DCAU Resource.
Funny you should ask. Yes, me and Jorge Gutierrez came up with a pitch together that was not greenlit. It was going to be called Bat Hombre. It was based on a real DC character that already existed named Bat Hombre, who even before Jorge got a hold of him, what Bat Hombre was a man in Mexico who takes on the role of Batman, and he is Batman with a sombrero and a mustache. This was already the character. He's just from one issue, and he turns out to actually be like a villain. It's not a good story, but he exists. He's on a cover. And so Jorge did a version of Bat Hombre, which was Batman with a sombrero and a mustache, but in Jorge's style. And it was going to be... It was during this era when in the comic books they were doing this thing called Batman Incorporated, where Bruce Wayne was going around the world and basically using his money to fund Batman in other countries. And we sort of took that idea and we were like, oh, so the idea was that he was like a guy in Mexico City who sees Bruce Wayne getting mugged and, doesn't know he's Batman. So he like rushes over to save him. And then Bruce Wayne's like, hey, you're all right. You want to beat Batman? And he's the Bat Hombre of Mexico City. And at the time, Warner Brothers, and probably now, honestly, Warner Brothers was taking Batman very seriously, and they didn't want to do a super, even though I did some really goofy stuff in DC Nation. They didn't want us to do a really goofy Batman cartoon. And really then what happened is Jorge left to go make his movies. I think if Jorge had stayed at Warner Brothers, we probably would have done some version of it eventually. But once they initially were worried about it being not received well, and then Jorge wasn't there anymore. So that's my the big one that got away. The other one is me and Will Patrick, who did the Animal Man shorts together and the Tales of Metropolis shorts together. When we pitched the Superman Tales of Metropolis ones, we also pitched a series of Etrigan the Demon shorts, because Etrigan the Demon's deal is that he has to rhyme to use his powers. He's a human man who turns into a demon by saying, I think the rhyme is like, "Gone now, form of man, and rise the demon Etrigan." And so we had the idea that like he couldn't cast any spells or do any powers unless he could make it rhyme. And the whole joke was him like having trouble coming up with poems.
He goes to acting school.
Yeah, it'd be like Etrigan losing the fight because he can't figure out what to rhyme with fireball. So they didn't go with that. We did the Superman ones instead.
So funny. I love it.
But if you look up Jorge, Jorge's definitely posted images of Bat Hombre. You can find it.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh, that would have been funny though.
I know, it would have been.
Yeah,
it would have been so.
But
cool.
it's true. It's true. I feel like Batman is like that one franchise that is like, no, it's serious forever.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm glad they did Batman Brave and the Bold. At least that's what they were working on when I first got to Warner Brothers, which is sort of the
Lego
lighthearted.
Batman.
Yeah, Lego Batman.
That one's goofy.
And people like Batman. Look, I love the great thing about Batman is he can be serious or goofy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, even when I did Batman Ninja Turtles, I played, that's definitely there are definitely jokes in that movie. It sort of has that Marvel movie tone of like a serious action movie, but with a lot of jokes. But Batman is if Batman's funny, it's like in a straight man way. He's like, it's funny because he's being serious in a funny situation.
Well, since we're talking about Batman versus TMNT, from @CashedArt, we have a question. What was the most enjoyable part about writing Batman versus TMNT? And did you end up taking inspiration from previous incarnations from both properties, or did you do it all with your own vision?
Yeah, well, I mean, the most rewarding thing was just getting to do it. I mean, it's still one of my best credits. It's one of the things I'm most proud of. It was received really well. I mean, it was based on was kind of a 1-2 thing, because first of all, it's Batman, who I'd never really gotten the opportunity to really write, even though I had been at Warner Brothers for a long time at that point. And then, the Ninja Turtles, who, are Nickelodeon, and I don't even work there. So, like, those are two sets of characters that I really love and really grew up with. I really, really liked Ninja Turtles when I was a kid. I was very into the 80s, 90s Ninja Turtles show. I had a ton of Ninja Turtles toys. I read a lot of the comics. So I was really into the live action movies. So, I mean, yeah, the rewarding thing really was just getting to do this just very cool, like, it sounds made up. It's such a cool sort of project. And it was based on a comic that DC had done. That's good. It's a good comic. I tried to adapt as much of the comic into our movie as I possibly could, because I wanted fans of the comic to feel like it was a in good faith adaptation of that comic, not just the concept of Batman and Ninja Turtles. So that was really fun. And I know the writer of the comic, James Tynion, was like a friend of a friend, like casual acquaintance, and it was cool to be able to like while I was working on the movie, I would like see him at parties and be like, I'm adapting your comic, I'm doing this, and he's like, oh, that's so cool, what about this? I'm like, oh, cool. Like, it was cool to be able to do that.
Oh, that's really cool. That must be really fun.
And he's like a superstar comic writer now, but that was one of his first comics, so he was very excited. Back then he was like, I can't believe you're adapting one of my things. And there's probably gonna be like 5 TV shows based on his creator-owned stuff in the next couple of years, so keep an eye out for that stuff. He's great. So that was the most rewarding thing. As far as inspiration, I feel like, I mean, the biggest inspiration was the comic. A lot of the jokes and the lines and characterization comes directly from the comic. So I can't speak to what James's inspiration was for how he wrote them, but I feel like for the most part, I was trying to do kind of I figured there was a good chance this might be the only time I get to write the Ninja Turtles, maybe the only time I get to really write a serious Batman, definitely the only time I'm going to write them together, so I got to really do this right. And I just tried to write everybody the way I would do it. Like, my idealized, if I was writing a Ninja Turtle comic, if I was writing a Ninja Turtle show, this is how I would write the characters. But I think that what that meant was I was writing the characters the way I remembered them from the live action movie. And I don't think I wrote them exactly like the live action movie, because I think it went through the lens of my sensibility. But I think the first live action movie is probably my baseline for the Ninja Turtles. And then for Batman, I was trying to write him like Batman the Animated Series Batman, because that's what everybody's going to do for the rest of time, because it's the best version of Batman. And for Batgirl, there was a current Batgirl comic happening at the time, which people usually call Batgirl of Burnside, where she had that purple costume and she was like a college student. And I was kind of trying to write her like that. I really liked that comic. That's what she looked like in our movie. And then for the only character I would say I didn't really do my like perfect version of is Damian Wayne Robin. The story needed him to be kind of a stick in the mud and a little bit of like a mini Batman, because Batman was not going to soften that much, and so I needed someone who could start with that super serious, these turtles are buffoons attitude, but then warm up to them by the end more than Batman ever would. And so that's how Damian wound up filling that role, because I needed him to. That's not really my perfect ideal version of Damian Wayne. My perfect Damian Wayne is like a little psycho murderer. I think in a perfect world, I think Damian should be kind of funny because he's such a little maniac. That's what I think is funny, is that he's a little ninja assassin who thinks he should be Batman right now. It would be my perfect Damian. So I would say for every character, I just wrote them in the way I would in a perfect world, except Damian, because I needed him to be a little more serious for this story.
That's really cute. That was a question that actually answered a question that was very similar with which was from @GRO Repairs, which was also about the characterization of the turtles. They really loved how the turtles were characterized in that Batman versus Tmnt.
Yeah, it was really fun, and you know, like I said, also a lot of it really did just come directly from the comic, because I used a lot of lines and stuff from the comic. I would say probably like And then like, yeah, it's just a weird mix. It's like Raphael and Leonardo, I was trying to do first live action movie, Raphael and Leonardo. Michelangelo, I was basically doing 80s cartoon Michelangelo because that's the most fun. And then Donatello, I just wrote like me.
We had questions from a couple other people. We might not have the time to get through all of them. I'll just shout out their names just because it's really great that they asked for prompts and questions. So one was from CSM Valentin, and one was from @Chevistian1, who said Right Now Kapow was the jam. The last question that I think would be kind of fun to go over is from @Dimps who asked any tips on avoiding cliche comedy beats or phrases in your scripts.
Yeah. So I mean, comedy, I'll do. It's different things. So comedy phrases, it's tough because there's this thing that happens in comedy writing where essentially certain combinations of words sound funny to everybody writing comedy all at the same time, and so we all start using them. And usually someone used it first, and technically everyone else is copying that person, but so quickly everybody does it that you forget that someone had to do it first. That's how you get that's how you get stuff like every movie for 5 years straight having the line, "I think I threw up in my mouth a little." Someone did it first, but then people were just like, that's just a funny thing to say. And then it became a cliched thing to say. And so honestly, like, I think it was the Workaholics writers that did this and then like posted a picture of it. Honestly, the way to avoid comedy phrases and cliches is to notice them. Like basically keep a list of like phrases that you feel like you've seen too much of and just make sure you don't use them. Because they're gonna sneak in. You're gonna do it. You're gonna be writing your script, and all of a sudden you're gonna realize you just wrote someone saying, "Oh, he's standing right behind me, isn't he?" And you just gotta notice it and change it because you're sick of it. I think a big one for me is in my stand-up. I used to say that's not a thing a lot, and then I slowly realized everyone was saying that, and I needed to stop. So it's really just observe the cliches and the phrases so you can catch yourself when you do it. And that is also why, there's a comedy thing called, it comes up in improv the most, but it's because on improv you have to come up with jokes on the spot. So you have to try to avoid those cliches in real time, which is much harder. But it applies to writing also, which is we say like, don't go from A to B, try to go from A to C. So it's like, if one idea makes you think of a second idea, probably everyone will think of that second idea. So try to think of a third idea, because maybe you're the only one that thought of that third idea. So that's the simple version of that. Just make sure you don't like do it too many steps. You don't want to go from A to E, because then no one can tell how you got there, and it's just weird.
This is too relatable.
One thing me and my friend Justin used to say is, if you're gonna go off the rails, the train needs to still be like within eyesight of the train track. You need to know where the rails were, because if you can't even see the rails anymore, now it's just a train in a field. That's a different thing.
Yeah, now it's dangerous. That was great. I wanted to, okay, since we're kind of like running long on time, what's your best advice on creative block in less than 30 seconds?
All right. Okay. Here's an old comedy writing trick. This is best for coming up with sketches or stand-up ideas, but you can do this for anything. All right. So if you think that two different ideas are sort of funny and interesting to you, right? And you think maybe there's some way they're related. Like you're like, okay, I like sports. I like sports anime. I like baseball, but I also like sci-fi. So what if there was like a show that was like a sci-fi baseball team going through space playing games in a galactic league? A way you could come up with ideas for that is you make a list of ideas and words and concepts related to baseball, and then you make a list of ideas and concepts and words related to outer space, and then you start comparing those lists, and you go, okay, a free agent, but also interstellar travel, and you're like, okay, they get a new player from another solar system, and you just go down the list and you come up with 100 bad ideas and hopefully one good one.
That was great. That's Amazing. Great tip in less than 30 seconds. Sorry for rushing you.
No, that was probably that 30-second version was the best way to give that advice. More time would not have made it any better.
Is there anything you want to plug before we go?
Yeah, I do. I mean, mostly I'm on Twitter, so you can follow me at MarlyHG, which is MarlyHG. And I also have my own podcast called Hero Rewatch that I do with my brother Austin. And the premise of our podcast is we're rewatching our first project is we're rewatching the Marvel Studios movies because me and Austin are really big fans of them. But I'm 12 years older than him, so for most of his life, I've been on an opposite coast from him, and we've just been talking about Marvel comics and Marvel movies on the phone. And that age difference means he's basically the age now that I was when the first Iron Man movie came out. So we've been revisiting the movies, seeing how they seem different to us now that there's 27 of them, now that we're older, now that the world has changed, what fandom means to us has changed, and comparing our experiences as very different aged people. He's at the very beginning of his career in entertainment. He's also a film major like me, and I've been doing this for a while, and it's a great time to jump on because we just did Infinity War Part 1. We're gonna probably be at Avengers Endgame around the time this episode comes out. So if you want to hear us go through the Marvel Studios movies and revisit them with a slightly critical and slightly film majory eye, but also as big fans of the characters and the source material, that's what we've been doing. And then we're gonna move on to other movies and other fun stuff, anything we want to go back and rewatch and revisit. So that's Hero Rewatch on all the big podcast apps, Spotify, Anchor, Apple, and we're on Twitter at Hero Rewatch. So if you want to check that out, hear me talk about stuff, you can. There's a lot of it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I guess that's the end of this creative block. Marly, thanks for being our guest and sharing your story. And thanks to your listeners. Follow us on Twitter. It's at Creative Block, creative without the vowels, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor Clemens for editing the podcast and Malik for helping us produce the show. If you love our show, then support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews as well as bonus episodes. Click the link in the description of this episode. I've been your host, V. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week. Bye!
Bye. Thanks for having me.